All right, so let's take a quick look at how to work perhaps with two images. One is something like a background, and you might load that image from open. Maybe it's going to be an image. Actually, I don't have the right folder here. These are the Osprey images I'm going to get to a little bit later. So it might be an image that you loaded, that you created, something that you import, and it's the new image. So I'm just going to simulate that here and say, for instance, we load an image with some plasma noise, right? Something like that, or maybe a sky. Let me turn the preview off of my brush here. All right, so this is the sky, or maybe we'll go render one, something like the sky. Very quick and easy. Or so I thought. Let's see if I have a selection mask that needs to be cleared. There, render, sky. Adjust some parameters a little bit here. Okay, so let's say this is our sky. Let me go store that image. That's really something that should be part of your workflow when you work with multiple images. Make it a habit to store the important ones. I'm going to use the hand here to move this up a little bit, move this into the area where I can see it all together. There's also a zoom, or rather, like, yeah, zoom in or out, a magnifying glass. You can use that with the mouse right inside the image here if you hold the shift and the control key down at the same time. So control shift makes it move around with the left button, and with the right button you get to zoom in relative to where you start your zoom. So that's an interesting feature if you need to quickly zoom in, get a close-up look at something there. All right, so let's get back to the second image, right? So I have a second image, and that's the one. If I click here on the thumbnail of the stored background, it gets it back. So that's one reason why you may want to have a stored copy, because you can easily switch between different images that you want to work with. All right, and so this one here is what I need to load. So if I load it, let's see here from the open feature, the open option in the file menu. You can see in this case I have multiple versions. Some of them were BMP, converted to BMP, but with a tool that lost the alpha channel. So if I actually load the BMP, it's probably not going to have that alpha channel anymore. Let me zoom in a little bit and see if I can enable alpha on. Yeah, you don't see the selection mask or the marching ants around the helicopter, the airplane here. It's not a helicopter. I hope I didn't offend anybody here. It's an Osprey. So you can see the marching ants all around it. That means this image did not have 32-bit RGB plus alpha. It only had 24 bits RGB. And so, but I do have a version of the image that contains the original alpha selection mask as well. Let me go store this one though first, just in case we want to go and work with that one as well. Store image copy. So just because it's not perfect, doesn't mean we can't use it. We might still be able to do something about it. So let's go back to the perfect scenario, which is you have a PNG file, right? And that's something you'll see a lot when you either buy assets or you create them in some 2D program or 3D program. Including in Howler, in Dog Waffle. If you save it as a PNG and you have a selection mask currently in the alpha channel, that selection mask will indicate which pixels are opaque versus which pixels are transparent. And then it doesn't matter whether the background is white or black or blue or has an image or not. It's transparent, you won't see those pixels. So that's the ideal scenario if you want that to be used as an asset on top of another image. That's a very typical thing we usually do in some other programs when we work through layers. Well, here I'm going to load, after loading the image, the selection is disabled, but you can turn it back on, and now you can see that it does have the marching ants around here. Never mind the ones out here. These are not moving. Those were just left over from the prior. If you zoom in or move around, you'll see that it gets away. It goes away. So this is really where the selection mask is. If you have any doubts about it, one thing you can also do is store the alpha alone, and that will help you ascertain that indeed the selection is on the inside, meaning the helicopter is the one that's selected. You don't want the inverse scenario, like if you invert it and you see this, then that means the helicopter, even though you can recognize it here, it's the one that's actually a hole, it's not selected. the background would be the one that's selected in this case. And you really want to have the selection mask like this so that you can do a couple of things. One of them is you can pick it up as a brush, a custom brush. Right? And when you do that, when you use the selected as a brush, or if you go to the custom brush pickup tool, same thing, except that it doesn't take the entire image and looks for selected pixels. So you get to choose the portions you want to pick up. So you could actually make it a little bit more narrow. Not exactly two though in this case. I mean, if I pick this up and then I see I have it in a brush and I can store it in a brush, I got this one. That's a stored brush now. Another approach would be, as I showed earlier, to go use selected as brush, and that looks at the entire image and then finds the most narrow bounding box where any selected pixels are contained. So if there are a number of pixels on the outside that are not selected, those will not be in the brush. This is perhaps the tightest brush you can a brush image you can find. It does also disable the selection mask. It doesn't it doesn't clear it, it just disables it, so you can turn it back on. Oops, I stand corrected. Let's go back 2 steps. There you go. So now you can see it again if you have to or want to. But the brush that I just picked up, I can store that one as well. And so you see this one is very similar to the prior one, but it has less of a gap along the edges because the search for selected pixels allowed it to find the very smallest containing rectangle, the bounding box of the selected pixels. And so you have a little bit more of a gap around here on this one. And so it's usually a slightly better result, a smaller file, smaller image, if you use this, you select it as brush, because any pixels that are selected, even if they are not more than 50% selected, you would still see them and pick them up. Remember, the marching ants is not indicating where something is selected or not selected. It's indicating where it is at 50%, because it's an 8-bit value. The alpha channel is not a single bit. It's not just on or off. It's not just selected or not selected. You actually do have the ability to have sort of a transition, a total of 256 values. So 50% halfway is where the marching ants is showing. And if you have a very blurry situation, let me do that. Let me show you here. If I blur the selection, let's say here with the Gaussian blur alpha, if I blur that selection, you see it's got this blurry effect on that. The marching ants are showing where the 50% transition is. And if I were to store this selection mask, you can see here that it's a very blurry selection mask, but somewhere along that is where that 50% margin is transitioning. And funny enough, there is also some up here. I don't know if that bled through from the edge at the bottom or if that's just a side effect and a little bit of a glitch. These can be easily cleared, by the way. You can use the ellipse to alpha or the rectangle to alpha and simply select it, or with the right button deselect it. Oops, hold on. There. Now I lost the parts that were there, so if I want to really deselect that one up here, let's undo this. I want to deselect this without affecting this part. I'll simply use a shift key, and then with the right button I can remove this from being selected. Anyway, going back to working with these, if I undo this until I got my my chopper or my airplane selected here, I want my Osprey to be usable as an item to stamp on top of another image. As if I put one, like the background, like as if I put this into the into the background, let's say the layer 1, and then use the Osprey as layer 2. And this is the thing, you can do that, but it's not trivial in Howler, and it's not really gonna show you the opaque layer behavior. So the way to do, really, I think, for something like this is to pick it up as a custom brush and store it so you can manage it if needed, and then see what happens if you enable it, right? PRV will enable the preview of your current brush if you have a custom brush, and that's exactly what that is. So if you enable the custom brush, you can enable the preview, and you need to be in the brush tool to see this toolbar here, this context bar. If you are in other options here, it's not gonna be the brush behavior. So you need to be in the brush tool, and then enable the preview, the PRV here. All right, so then you might say, well, I want this to be a couple of times. I want in other programs you might think you need to have multiple layers, and you have one layer where this thing is going to be small. Well, here we're going to work through the brush, right? So we're going to make the size a little bit smaller and stamp it down once there. In fact, we might even want to give it a little bit less saturation also, and a little bit more of a bluish tint to make it appear like it's disappearing into the fog. All right, so let's in fact make one even smaller than that, and that's the one where we will work on, let's see, hue saturation value. Hue a little bit bluish, and I don't know which way to go, but maybe we don't need to worry about that too much, but that's saturation, a little bit less of that, and value a little bit less of that, or maybe a little bit more if you wanted to kind of make it a little bit lighter because of the fog. So we can put another one down there, and then we'll go in the opposite direction. Now let's reset all these parameters in the brush, and this time we'll have perhaps one here, and then another one here, and then we'll want one really big one up close. So we'll make this one even bigger, and it will be like here, but we want it brighter so it stands out from the coloring of the other ones behind there. So we'll go a little bit brighter, a little bit more saturated. That might also make it look like it's really closer, and you can see how that's starting to come together. And we did not use a single layer to do this. So it's instead of working through layers, sometimes the similar effects can be obtained by working through time and the brush. Right? It's done in sequence. You think a bit about where things are, and yeah, granted, it's more difficult to change it if you decide that one back here. Right? If you decide this one back here should be a little bit off, and you want to reposition it. Granted, that's not going to be easy to do. You're going to have to go backtrack that in time. You can easily store any progress you make here, right? You can store this one, like we already did. Store this one, and then next one here, store this one. There, store this image, and then I'm right-clicking on my undo button here. That will actually redo, and then store this one here. And every time as you do another one, if you think that's good and you want to kind of have a snapshot of that, just in case you need to get back to it, I would recommend you do that. So for instance, if this one was not quite perfect, you could say, well, let's go back to this one and get me this brush again, and perhaps you decide it needed to be a little bit smaller, and perhaps even a different angle, right? Maybe you want to rotate it. You could do that with layers too, but you'd have to rotate the object in the layer or rotate the whole layer. That depends on the program and what it lets you do. So here's one that's rising up to the challenge, and, so to speak. And so at that point, maybe I want to have again one a little bit bigger, and add the full default orientation, or maybe even like diving in like this, perhaps even bigger than that, something like that. And hue, the saturation, maybe a slightly different color. Actually, that's the thing too, is if you give it a different color, a different hue, you can make a drastically different type of airplane too. So that's basically some of the techniques you can use as alternatives to layers when you have multiple elements that you want to stamp on each other with the alpha channel, indicating through the brush what pixels to actually affect with it and how much. Now there is another scenario too, and that's you have an image in the background, let's say this one, and you have another image already, and it might be something like this, but with a plain white background, right? Something like this, right? And you might have that image on a file. So let's go do that. Let's go open one that's the PNG. Let's go. Let's get another one here. Let's say this one here. And that will replace the entire image. Let's get rid of the preview on the brush. So I'm not going to need these anymore. So here's the image that I want to composite with another one of some beautiful background. Right? Can you do that still in Howler, even though the layer system, while it's there, is not quite as expansive. It's difficult to describe it, but what I'm going to do is say, well, first of all, we just loaded this image, which does contain the object that should be opaque, plus it does contain a background that appears to be black here. In the preview on the Windows, it shows it white, and that's really the liberty that Windows takes to show it white, because it sees the pixels as transparent. So I say, well, I'm going to just show it white. The actual value in those pixels is probably not white. It doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily white just because Windows shows it like this here. It may have overwritten it, and it is very likely that it's actually a black pixel. But because Windows also sees the transparency flag, the value on the alpha channel, it says, well, let's just flag it as white. Is there really an alpha channel? Well, did we load it? We can go here and enable the alpha, and then we can see, sure enough, yep, there is a selection mask here of some sort. If we go to store the alpha, we can see, yep, there it is. That's the way we want it. That's the selected Osprey. Now, one thing you can do is you can store this entire image, and it's not going to just store the colors. It's also going to store the alpha. Even if the alpha is currently off, what you can do is to disable to store this entire image, store image copy. Right? And when you do that, you're not just storing the RGB channels, you're also storing the current alpha mask. And the fact is, you can click this little icon going down here, this little arrow, and you get a couple of ways to restore the image. Right? So if I have a different image here, and now I say, oh, I want to restore it, the fastest way is to just click here. And that will only restore the let's see, if I clear the alpha channel, and then I click here, and then I make sure the alpha is enabled. Yep, it did not restore the alpha. So clicking the thumbnail only restores the colors. And the thing you want to do is sometimes also restore the alpha that was saved away with it. Right? You can replace the alpha, and there you are. Right? So you can actually simply do this. You can let's totally clear everything here. Clear the alpha, clear the image, or just put something else in there. And now let's go and load a new image, something like I don't know, this one here, and load this, and we know that will also load the alpha channel, as we can see here on the alpha on off. Okay, now let's do something different. Let's load it straight to stored. Right, so we'll go to import, load the stored image, and we'll load another one, this one. Right, so this one went straight to the stored image. And if we have nothing here, no selection mask, let's make sure we have it all cleared. So clear alpha, clear the image, and we click this guy and then also restore the alpha. That one did not. So importing the image straight to stored only loads the RGB values. Right? So that's the thing we want to keep in mind, that if you need the alpha channel with it, be sure to store it, be sure to open it this way. Let's say, for instance, this guy. There you go. Okay, and then you can store it. That's really part of your workflow now. You want to store the image. Let's go close the others that we don't need. This one, this one. And you want to store that so that you have not just the colors but also the alpha channel. You can now clear this. You can clear the selection if there was any doubt that that was cleared. Now what I want to do is really combine this image with this image. Right? So we have this image here, we have this image here, and I want to combine the two. Here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to go into the swap image. We used to call that the swap buffer. So you can see under the image menu that you can jump between the two. You can jump to the swap image. That one currently is blank, and you can jump back to it. Right? And you see up here whether you're looking at the main image or the swap image. Sometimes we call it the alternate image or the swap image or swap buffer. There's a couple of different ways to describe it. I think in Particle 9 we call it yet something else. And I actually like the name we call it, I just forgot it. But you can also use this little icon up here that looks like an S. That's to switch or to jump between the main and the swap image. And you keep an eye on this up here next to Howler 9, it says main. If I click here, it now says swap. All right, so click main, click swap. All right, so that's really an interesting tool also, because you're looking at the back side of your canvas. You have the front side, you painted or you loaded an image in. Now you'd like to put something else on the back side and then kind of rub it through or bring it in, right? So one way to do that is, in fact, go to the swap image, click here to restore that right into this, right? And also the alpha channel, go replace alpha. Now switch back on the main, and you still have that alpha selection here, right? You can turn it on. That doesn't clear it, it's still there, right? It just doesn't show it. But if you show alpha, there you go. Now what you could do is rub it through. So you can use a brush such as a large airbrush and use the mode that is the rub through mode, right? And in the rub through mode, whatever is currently on here on this side will be rubbed through to this side, but only as permitted by the selection mask, by the alpha channel, right? So as you're painting, you're essentially revealing or transferring, there it is, you're transferring the pixels, the colors from the Osprey that was in the swap image, you're transferring them over to the pixels in the main image. Now you can clear or turn off the alpha and you see the result. Now that's one way to do it if you want to manually control how much of that should occur, right? Because you can actually do that. You can say, let's do a little bit here, a little bit here, and kind of do a ghost appearance of the airplane. You know, it's not showing through everywhere. But that's not always the fastest way. Plus, you might overdo it because there is some transition on the alpha channel. And if you rub through it a little bit too much, the anti-aliasing gets corrupted there. It may just keep accumulating too much, and eventually you'll see the staircasing again. Right? I don't know if you noticed that, but that's exactly what we saw here as I'm going over this, and it looks pretty good. But then I see, wait, why do we have these staircases showing here? Right? If I undo this and I go just a little bit, it's okay, but if I keep going over it, it keeps accumulating. So the painted effect is okay in some cases, but in cases like these, you may not like that. You may not want to go over it accidentally too much or with too much impact and then see the staircasing there. That is just the nature of abusing the anti-aliasing. The alpha channel has that anti-aliasing effect, but if you keep accumulating and painting and rubbing through several times, it will have accumulated too much, and you'll start seeing that anti-aliasing, that aliasing again. So here's another technique, and that's to just do it in one filter effect. Right? So let's go until we are ready there. So I have this image. Let's show it without the alpha. Right? I have this image here, and I have the other image here, which also carries the alpha channel. Okay, I want to see the alpha channel just to be sure I have it. Okay, there it is. So now what I want to do is combine through the alpha mask. I want to combine these colors, these pixels from the swap, into this image on the main image. So the ones where the alpha is masking off will not be affected, will not be modified. That's what we call combine with swap. Under the filter, you have combine with swap, and you can combine with swap in many different ways. The one we're really looking for is mix buffers, and then here you get to say how much you want to mix them. Right now we're not mixing them, so we're seeing still the colors from the main image, but we say, hey, give us a bit more and more and more, and oh, look at that. Now we just transferred the entire pixels from the swap image right into the main image, right? And only where the alpha channel allowed it to do so. So then we okay that. Then we clear the selection, or we turn it off here, and we have a beautiful transition. Not much aliasing, still very clean, and a great composition of the two images. So in the end, if that's really what you needed to do, is to composite one image with another, instead of loading them into two different layers and then flattening them, this is another way to do it, right? And just to finish, what you can see actually, if you look at the layers options here, I have my sidebar on the right side. You probably, when you start, you have the layout here with sidebar. There it is, sidebar on left. That's the default configuration. So I would, if you like my layout, I would put the sidebar on the right, and then you'll see something here which is on the layers. Is that we have just one layer by default, but we do show both the main image and the small icon next to that, which is a swap image, right? And if you switch the two, boom, look at what happens down here. Look at that. They switch, right? This is what is swapping the main and the swap image, right? And you can do that here too. Jump to the swap. That's really switching the two. And so one thing you can do is you can actually also use that to kind of transfer an image, create a new layer, right? And then put that, what is in the swap image, put that in front of it here into the main, simply by switching the two, right? And if down here you didn't have the one, if you had this one here, right? So you can turn the layers off. You can, but it is not an opaque layer. It's not a layer that carries an opacity value in the layer to decide which pixel should be actually shown from that layer. Okay, that's something Howler just doesn't do. It doesn't have the 32-bit per layer architecture, just 24 bits. So I showed you another way to combine the two. Don't try through the layers unless you want to actually use the layers for other things. You have many different other things you can do here, and you could potentially do a combination that is just a different effect, right? Like subtracting one from the other and get some sort of ghosting effect or something like that. There's lots of benefit in using that, but that's just not the technique used or recommended if you want to simply combine two layers. What I recommend is you use the main and the swap image, put into the main image what will be the background, and then put into the swap image what will be the foreground with some sort of a selection mask. And if that selection mask already exists because it came from the PNG file that you import, you can restore it. Even if you stored the image, you can go into replace alpha, and that will restore the alpha and show you what pixels are ready to be transferred from swap back into the main image when you use this filter called combine with swap, right? Because that one does respect the alpha channel as well, and it does actually combine on a per pixel basis only when the alpha channel allows it. All right, so that's basically it. I wanted to show you two techniques. One is the main and the swap image that we just finished with. The one before was with the custom brush, and certainly the custom brush may be a little bit faster if you need to do that many times, right? I mean, that's really the thing about the custom brush, is that you can go and let's see, if we get rid of the alpha here, if you don't think in layers but rather just in events, and you make a full opacity here on the brush, you can paint this thing here, right, and very quickly have a whole armada of helicopters, and they can be, of Ospreys, and they can be painted, they can be animated, right? So there's a lot more you can do with that, but just not done through the layers. All right, I hope this helps. Keep asking your questions on the Steam discussion forums, and would love to see what you come up with and what you create with it. Thanks for watching.